Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg and today we're going to be configuring a Alpine Linux install with the integrated ACF web UI. This allows you to be able to configure packages and also control your server using an already built web interface. It makes it a lot easier if you're running in a headless configuration or if you just don't want to connect to it using the console or using a KVM. So before we get into it, be sure to smash that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. But let's get right into it. Okay, so a couple key things. So ACF stands for Alpine Configuration Framework, and it's a tool built to control Alpine Linux using the web interface. It actually runs using a mini HTTPD. And it is password protected, so you can create users with access to be able to administrate it, and it's using the integrated authentication. So same people who would be able to log in through SSH would be able to log into this web UI to be able to configure it. It offers a centralized hub to manage applications and system configuration, as well as it's a good way to add a dashboard to many of the projects that we've already covered on this channel. So if you've seen them, we've gone through the command line, going into text files and configuration files. My cat's saying hello to everybody. But this is a good way to add the web UI configuration to be able to accompany that. And then it uses SSL by default. So it is very secure, but you can obviously make it more secure by adding signed certificates, things of that nature. Otherwise, it will show up with that untrusted certificate error. And then finally, the interface is a little bit clunky, but once you actually get into it, it is very intuitive. So we're going to just get started here. We're going to first configure what we need. So I have a baseline installation of Alpine Linux. Here, she wants to actually say hello. You want to say hello? You want to say hello? She's going to try and climb onto my desk throughout the entire video now, or the entire stream now. So we're going to see how this goes. So what I have here, though, is it's pretty much a vanilla image of Alpine Linux. It's 20.4, 3.20.4. So nothing special about it. This is available pretty much for most of the versions that are still available today, and for all of the distributions. So I happen to be doing this on a Raspberry Pi 5, but this also works for x86 and other variations for other hardware. So first we're going to log in, and we're going to do setup Alpine first, because it will need to download some packages, things of that nature. So we want to make sure it has network connectivity. So we'll do setup Alpine, US keyboard. I'm just going to name this ACF demo. My cat is literally on my desk here. So we're going to have to deal with that really quick. Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to call it ACF demo. And then we're going to initialize the network. So I'm going to use ETH0 in this particular case. I'm going to use DHCP, but obviously if you're setting this up to where you want to access it remotely, you may want to give it a static IP address. And we're not going to set up wireless Wi-Fi or anything else like that on that today. So it's going to give it an IP address. For those who are long-time watchers of the channel, it's a different subnet. I redid all my VLANing and everything else like that. But it's prompting us to change our root password. And this is the password that we're going to use to log into the web UI for the first time. So I'm going to set something very, very secure. Confirm it. Set our time zone. I don't have a proxy in this case. I'm going to set up Crony as our NTP source, and we'll actually install a utility in a little bit when we get into the web UI to be able to monitor and control Crony as well. We're going to choose our APK mirror. I am going to enable community repositories just because, and then choose the default, the first one. We're not going to set up an additional user, although we will also be able to do that through the web interface as well. And then we'll set up OpenSSH. We're not planning on using it today, but just for whatever reason if we want to. We're not going to install it to disk. I do have an NVMe present, but we're not going to use that. We're just running off an SD card here, just generally. So the NVMe was from a different project from the last stream, as it were. And then we're going to go into set our cache. So now we're all set. We'll do lbu commit-d to save it out. So now we get into the actual setup of ACF. And it's very, very complicated. We're going to do setup ACF. It's going to install everything, and it's done. So it is actually that easy for the baseline install. It won't do a lot of stuff out of the box in terms of external packages, things like that. And we'll go through how to install those, but just so you have an idea, you can do that through the command line as well. So you could do apk search ACF. And this is the full list of what's available. So if I actually go over and zoom in a little bit on what we got here, we could see you could do free switch, gross, IP route, IP tables, jQuery, light TPD, LVM, MariaDB, Open LDAP, Open NTPD, Open SSH, Open SSL, so you can actually provision certificates, things of that nature. And then scrolling down from there, OpenVPN, which will be a future video when we'll actually install OpenVPN, and we'll use this to be able to actually configure and provision those certificates for that as well as users. And then, let's see, Samba, which is another good one, Snort for intrusion detection for networks, Squid, which is similar, TinyDNS, scrolling down to the bottom, VLC daemon, Unbound, which is DNS, and Weblog, and then there's a few additional things at the bottom which contain things but are not part of this. So quite a lot that's able to be accomplished using this tool. So we're not going to add anything else here on the web or on the command line. So we're actually going to go into the web UI, and it's accessible from any computer pretty much. So what we're going to do is I'm going to scroll over and open a browser, and we're going to do https:// and I think that was the address it gave it, or was it 102? It was 102. Okay, so again, it pops up with this warning because by default it just generates an internal certificate. So it's not going to be something that is particularly trusted on any machine by default. So just keep that in mind, is if you want it to actually be able to be used without this error, you have to give it real certificates. We'll just continue onward. And this is what you get by default. So it just says welcome. In order to see anything at all, we have to log on to it. So we're just going to use our standard SSH login credentials. We're going to get a notification saying to change our password just because I put one that was insecure, but realistically, if you have one that is secure, it won't pop up with that. So right off the bat, we see we have a couple of things. We have interfaces, so we could see how everything is configured here. So we see all of it, including the IP route. We can actually edit that configuration or add additional interfaces, for example, configuring our Wi-Fi. If we restart our networking, just be careful. Standard stuff as if we were doing this any other way remotely. We can look at general health. It does give us a nice memory map to be able to say, what's being used where. So we see what's used, what's in buffers, and what's available. So right now we're 97% free, so I think we're doing pretty good in terms of resources. This is very lightweight. And then it also tells us versions and names for our repositories, as well as what's actually installed currently. So this is just the uname line right here. Uptime, the time zone, etc., and the current time that is set. We can look at hardware. It will give us a hardware readout. It will tell us about our storage. So we see we're really not using any of the memory card, etc., and then give us a breakdown of exactly what our disk partitions are and how we're using those. Gives us a broader details about our network, so including interfaces that are currently not configured. So very nice to have, as well as some network activity graphs. So, you know, if you want to actually know how your server built on Alpine Linux is performing, this is a great way to be able to do that. So, and we can of course filter out some things like the local loopback or interfaces that are not relevant or not enabled at all. Under user management, we can see that we can create a new account. We see root is currently listed. So we can go in here, we can choose a particular role for it. So admin, you know, editor, etc., which does actually relate to what they can do in here, user, things like that. And you do see that there's some other things here in terms of more granular type of approach for assigning these particular roles. So it's actually pretty powerful. We're not going to create it in this particular case, but pretty much anything that you could do with the command line is pretty much enabled here. There are some, like for example, there's no way to actually go through and change the shell, for example. But I think overall, totally usable and very relevant for doing general user administration, especially if you have SMB shares, things like that. You can create that base user. And then we could see lock events, so if they do lock themselves out, you can unlock them or unban IP addresses, things of that nature, if somebody enters their password incorrectly too many times. And then we can edit ourselves by choosing our particular look, home directories, things like that, you know, and be able to change our password. We can also define our roles. So if we go in here to view, we could see exactly what it's able to do. And we see that admin is just a shortcut where it has a lot of those other things, the other entries that we saw underneath it. And pretty much admin has access to everything. But if you wanted to create more restricted users for somebody who's only able to, for example, modify users or do certain things for users, you could define that without allowing them to actually change configuration settings on the underlying server. And then my favorite, which is packages. So here we can actually install additional packages to be able to add that additional support. So right now we're seeing what's currently installed, and it's currently showing, well, 9 rows, but that's all that's installed. We literally have nothing installed right now. But we could show up to 40 rows, and it shows us the dependent packages that we didn't install. So the things that were installed as part of installing these packages. So very easy, very straightforward. You can delete them, which will remove those particular packages. Of course, be careful about deleting the ACF package because that's going to break it, and you'll have to go into command line to fix it. But we can also install new packages. So under available, it will give us a full list of everything that's currently updated from our repositories. So if we actually wanted to update our repositories, we can go into expert, we can go into update, and update our indexes. And we see that it successfully downloaded the current index. Wonderful. We can also edit our repositories file to add additional repositories here. This is the, just like we would do on command line generally, it's available here. But We also see our cache directory, as well as enabling the cache or disabling it, and disabling it would just mean that it would download it from the servers every single time you needed it, on every boot. So just be careful. So let's actually install a new package. Let's do ACF and do a quick search for that. We're going to see it's going to pop up with everything. I'm just going to change this to 40 so we can pretty much see all of the rows. And we're going to scroll down. It's actually right here, Crony, and we're just going to do install. And what this will allow us to do is look at the stats and control Crony. We see it completed successfully and it popped up right here under networking. If it did not pop up, or for example, if somebody else installed it and you had the web interface open at the same time, you would have to log off and then log back in order to be able to see it. For some reason, it caches it until it receives a refresh event. And even doing a hard refresh won't do it. So, not sure why that's the case, but that's just the behavior of the tool. So, if you log out, log back in, it will show up correctly. But we can go in and take a look at what we just installed. So we see service is set to auto start under run level default. We can see what it's currently a Stratum 3. See the current date, time, the stats for what the offsets are. In this particular case, it says it's resolving to pool.ntp.org, but it's actually lying. It's just connecting to my router. I have it pointing there just because of restrictions I have, so it uses local time instead of actually going out to the internet in order to get it. But we see the update interval, things like that. But we can also start, stop, restart. So pretty much everything that we can do with that particular service through the command line, we can do here. So it audits that. That's why it's all these buttons are present. And, that's pretty useful. So we can choose to be able to also set it to operate in different modes. For example, using the secure key authenticated version of it, as well as changing our particular config to point to different servers. So all of that through the web UI. So that's how we can install those packages, be able to add that additional functionality to be able to incorporate different things. So just continuing on through what else is already available by default, we can look at the modules that are installed, whether they're in use. We can look at init, which are our startup, automatically starting services. And we can, of course, do the same type of start, stop, etc. to these as well. But we can also edit them, things like that. So these are all of the services that are on here by default with the addition of what we just installed. And then this, which is cron. So cron allows us to be able to run scheduled tasks. So I like this because it adds a very good way to pretty much create a very simple type of launch for any kind of script that we want. We just have to tell it what our period is. So if we want to put it under the 15-minute jobs, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. It doesn't give us necessarily the granularity that we would have with regular cron if we wanted it to run every minute, for example. But I think for most maintenance tasks, things like that, like if we wanted it to update automatically, we could use this to be able to enter it. So we could say automatic update, create this, invalid file name. It probably can't have a space. Right, and then we can go in here, edit it, and we tell it what to run. And we see exactly where it's putting this file. So if we were to go into the command line, we could actually look at this same exact file that we're editing here if for whatever reason we needed to do so. So if it was messing up our system and causing it to have problems, we could go in and delete this file if we wanted to, and it would reflect that here as well. But let's say we don't want it anymore. We can also delete it from the web UI, and now everything's back to normal. Then we have system logging. So we can see where all of our log messages go, set our log level. You know, if we want to have logs rotate automatically, for example, be able to set that up here, or set up remote logging for syslog support going to another server, which is always best practice, especially for if a hard drive dies, something like that. You don't want to lose all your logs to find out what happened or what was going on just immediately prior to that. So, you know, I'm a huge fan of syslogging generally. And then once again, gives you the expert mode, so that way you can just go in and edit it manually as if you were doing it inside of the script itself or inside of the config file. Then we can look at the actual log files themselves as well. So if we look at var log messages, we can go to view and we can see everything that's there. Or we can just go to tail and see the live log as it actually is running. So in this case, Damon Warren says unhealthy, syslog, you know, things like that. I don't know why it says that, but it's not happy with something. We're not going to fix that today. But pretty much as additional entries start to come in, they will appear here live. And we can stop that, we can start it, and it will provide that real-time update as if we were tailing the log on in the shell. Now, last thing we're going to cover with this is the skins. And this is by default. It's not necessarily, I would say, the best layout ever. And you'll see, I think it is actually the default, which is the wick, which I think is their wiki look, is better than most. So I'll go through them each really quick just so you can kind of see what's here. But Alps gives you this over here, but does kind of squeeze your workable area. You know, it's not too bad. Clouds makes everything smaller. Everything is kind of form fit. So if you like that, go for it. Ice, snow, and then back to wick. So really, it gives you a lot of options in terms of how you can actually do it. You can choose, each user can choose their skin individually based on their preference. So now that we've gone through all of that, let's try installing another package here really quick. We'll do Samba. But we're going to do ACF once again, assuming it will type. Let it filter. We'll scroll down here, find Samba, which is on the next page. So we have Samba here. I don't currently have Samba installed, but obviously it's got to read from Samba. So when we hit install here, it will actually install all of those dependencies. So we see, in addition to everything that it needs, it will install Samba Common, Samba Libs, all of that. So it's now fully installed Samba at the same time. So very usable, and we see Samba appears here under this new category, which is applications. Currently, it's not set to auto start, so we can enable that. We can define our shares, so we can create a share here. So we can call this home. We'll give it a path, /home. We'll call it /root. I don't know that it's actually going to be able to do anything, but that's all right. So we'll do guest access as no, and we'll make it writable. So if we were to go there right now, it would time out. I'm not going to try it because it's just going to take forever for it to do it. We're not going to put any special things, and we're just going to do create. So it's just going to be called home as the share name. We could also join a domain. We can go to expert, etc. Be able to directly modify the files that we're doing here. right? So quite a lot of capability to be able to do that. We see our new home path right down here. Then under status, we can start this manually. We see it started up okay. And then we can also enable auto start. We're going to do it at run level default. So we see it doing things. Under user management, I think we may be able to add it here as well. I'm doing control click. Save it, but I'm not sure that it's actually going to do it. We'll have to play around with that a little bit. But let's try and go to it really quick. We just started the service. We've configured everything to be able to do it. So let's try it. So we're going to 25.102. Let's try logging in with our root credentials. No, it doesn't like it. So that would be something that would be nice to have. So we could try creating a new user. We will set them to user. And we'll also choose Samba user. We're not going to define a home directory, but we will define user ID. We'll call it test user. Real name will be test user. Give it a really secure password. Not change anything else. It doesn't like it, so we'll call it. So it's enforcing minimum security complexity, minimum password complexity. Okay, so let's try this. So this time I set it to Samba user and also regular user. Let's see if it works. Now. So normally when we actually have Samba installed, we have to do smb passwd in order to be able to modify those particular credentials. It looks like it doesn't have that capability to be able to do it natively, or I'm not doing it right. So I haven't actually used this for that, because these really are not for that. So what this is talking about are the actual permissions to be able to see things on the top here. So like if we go back over to Samba, being able to see who's logged in, things of that nature. If we did guest, it would actually make it so anybody could see it. I don't know that it will let us log into the server that way, but we could try that too. Oh, it is also possible that we don't have permissions for it to generally share it, but yeah, maybe root wasn't the best folder to be able to do it. But point being, we could actually create a folder. No, this is scope creep. So pretty much this is what I wanted to show, though, was the ACF control panel, the ability to be able to manage and administrate your machine over a pre-built web UI, so that way you wouldn't have to rely on SSH. It's a bit more graphical and, you know, makes things a little nicer sometimes, especially if you're not in a location where you can easily access it instead of just going through SSH. So the graphs, everything else like that, especially involving the network interface, I think makes things really nice. and having all of this information relating to the server at hand is definitely something that will be of value for future projects. So thanks for watching this stream today. If you like it, be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And if you know anybody who would like this kind of content, please share it with them. I would appreciate it, and I hope they would appreciate it too. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It definitely helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm, and then hit that notification bell. That way you know the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.